Hi, everyone. Welcome to Journeys with PDA Coffee Chat podcast, where we seek connection, community, and co-regulation while discussing all things PDA.
Okay, welcome to the Journeys with PDA Coffee Chat podcast. I'm Kerissa.
And I'm Heather. Today we have a guest with us, Amanda Diekman from Low Demand Amanda. And we are just so excited that she is here today sharing our coffee with us, or not, or water, or whatever anybody's beverage might be for the moment. Amanda, we're going to just go ahead and jump right in and let you introduce yourself, if you don't mind.
No, I'd love to. Hi, I'm Amanda Diekman. I live in Durham, North Carolina with my husband and my 3 kids. We live in an intentional community that has been around for about a decade, centering people with disabilities and finding ways to live in interdependence together. So we're coming to you from the North Street community. And I began sharing online as Low Demand Amanda about a year ago, out of the tail end of my own breakdown and healing journey, as I discovered my own neurodivergence and my autism, and discovered my son, and then eventually my whole community here, our whole family community's neurodivergence, and also healed from some pretty severe trauma from parenting that I experienced out of my own PTSD. And I discovered that a part of my healing, my own way in the world, is to bring the stories of my life out into community and to share them with transparency and openness. That it's part of how I was made to be, that what I've been through, I feel compelled to reach back and help others through who are an earlier part of my journey. So all the things that I do are kind of thinking about that earlier version of me, maybe 2 years before my breakdown, if I could have gone back to that point and found low demand parenting then and been surrounded by community then. And what a difference that would have made in my life. So that's what I want to do in the world, is kind of find those people who are using all these high demand strategies, because that's what everybody tells them will work, and it's not working. And all they do is blame themselves. Like, it must be me. I'm the only one failing at this whole gig. And if I was just better at it, this wouldn't be happening. And I just want to wrap my arms around them and say, it's not you, that you've been sold a bill of goods that does not apply to your situation. It doesn't apply to you. It doesn't apply to your kids. And you get to find another way, and we're going to find it together.
Absolutely. That's amazing.
I just love that. Because that's kind of what Heather and I are. That's why we're doing this, is to speak life into those parents who are struggling and having a hard time and feel like nothing works, because that's where I was before we found pathological demand avoidance. Is I thought it was me. I blamed myself. I wasn't a good mom. If I could just get my act together, if I could just try a little bit harder, if I could just do that one other thing, it would all come together and we would all be fine and happy, cute little family. And like you said, that didn't apply to our situation, and it hurt, and I was hurting. Yes. I was hurting. And if I feel like if the mama is struggling and if that mama is hurting, how can she help her hurting kids?
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
Yeah. So you've been sharing your message for, you said, about a year now. And it sounds like it came from a very low point and a very very emotional point. And now it is kind of, it's, what word? See, I lose words. Like it's there, I can see it in my head, and now I can't. It's culminated into kind of like it's culminated into a book for you,
Yes.
and
Yeah,
that's just. Go ahead.
okay. You feel free to finish your sentence.
Oh no, no, no! But I've already forgotten what I started talking about.
Okay, I'll just jump in there.
Save me, Amanda.
Yes, I wrote this. My first book is coming out this summer, July 2023. It actually will coincide with my 40th birthday, so that's quite exciting for me. Um, I wrote the book about a year ago, and I wrote it. I was writing. I've always been a writer. I'm a trained ordained Presbyterian pastor, and so I've written countless sermons and emails and Bible studies and all kinds of things, devotionals. And I was a writer as a child. It was one of the main ways that I navigated being autistic in a neurotypical world, is that I pretended that I was a journalist and that I was interviewing people for a story, or that I was going to write a story about what I was watching. It gave me a social role to play in my own head so that it would ease some of that discomfort and difference that I felt all the time. But this period of my life where I was really recovering from deep trauma, I began writing again, and I wrote the story of our year of burnout for my child, who went into severe autistic burnout at age 6, that led to my own trauma and really the whole family's trauma. I was writing that story, and I kept getting these like how-to ideas. And so I opened another file on my computer, and I was like, okay, I'm trying to write a memoir. I want to write this very personal, very reflective story, but like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, like it just kept coming out of me. And again, like I just look back and I think, okay, that was totally my autistic brain. Like there's this fluid lyrical storytelling side, and then there's this order, like must put things into categories and boxes. And so so I had these, like, sometimes they would even be side by side. My screen would literally split in half. So the book Low Demand Parenting is the how-to side. It is everything that I learned over the course of this, breaking it all down and rebuilding together in deep connection and partnership with my children. It was how my brain saw order in all of this very beautiful but very difficult chaos. And I discovered that we were going through the same 6 steps over and over and over again as we dropped demands, figured out what really mattered to us, and then created a family culture around it. It was the same 6 steps. And so that became the framework of the book and of the way that I teach and coach now, around how to do low demand parenting. Because it was my experience when we got a PDA diagnosis for my child, everybody said, okay, now you need to do low demand. So I did. I went to Google and typed in low demand parenting book. Like, give me the book. I love to take systems and implement them. And of course, there wasn't one. So it was always in my head of like, somebody needs to systematize this. Somebody needs to teach this, because just saying, okay, drop all the things, that's not enough. That's not helpful. Like how and what about the stuff that really matters? And, what about medicine and school and partners who aren't aligned and all these things that come up? So the book has a whole section on screens. It has a whole section on partnership, because those are kind of the 2 things that I see come up over and over and over again. I probably could have done a section on school as well, but I just wasn't far enough along in my own evolution on school to write about it yet at that point. Now we're a fully unschooling family with all 3 of mine, but that was more of a journey than some of the other things. So yeah, the book really is, it's a manual for how to get the life of joy and ease that you're looking for when you're in the deep, dark hole where most of us start.
So what I hear you saying is that part 2, see, there's a lag sometimes and we end up talking over each other. I'm so sorry, Kerissa, go ahead.
let's see. I was going to say, I love that it's like this manual to low demand, because that's such kind of like an abstract concept, low demand. Like, what does that even mean? And so we talk to parents all the time, and we'll be like, well, you're gonna need to lower demands. And they're like, they are low. And we're like, okay, well, so probably not. But so the number one thing that we hear when we say, you're going to have to lower demands. And it is a hard concept, especially when you're probably in a place of crisis and struggle. And as a parent, you don't know what to do with anything, and you're worn out. And so what we hear is, well, do I just let my kids do nothing? They're just going to do nothing at all? And so that is a big question that comes up. And I think that there's a lot of fear for a parent, because there's so many demands on us as parents, society, or the way that we were raised. Like, you are supposed to do it this way. And then it's like, oh, hold up, you're going to redo it. So, I know that the book is going to explain this, but give us like that little teaser into when someone says, so I just let my kids do nothing. Mm-hmm. What is your, how do you respond to that?
Right. Low demand parenting is really a practice of attuning and aligning with your child right where they are, and providing them a space of safety where they can grow in the direction that they are internally motivated to go on, and then walking with them on that path that they choose as their partner, no matter what path it is. So I would say, if a parent is saying, do I just let them do nothing? They are probably living with a child in burnout, because children in burnout need to do nothing, by our standards. They're not doing nothing. They're actually healing and restoring their nervous systems. They're actually opting out from the whole system that we tried to impose on them. And they are radically standing up to that and saying, no, this is not for me. This is not life-giving for me. I can't do it. But for so many parents, it looks like everything's falling apart. It looks like you're doing nothing. Typically, kids are doing something. They're usually using their screen, and they're usually watching or playing games the majority of the day. And there is something to that. I think, I challenge the scientists to figure out why that is so healing and restorative for our kids, because we know that it is. So now go explain it. I don't know the full explanation, but I know that YouTube healed my son, and that my support of him choosing YouTube to heal was a crucial piece of that. So I would say, do I just let my kid do nothing? Yes. Not just let them. Choose that with them. Say, oh my gosh, what beautiful nothing you've chosen today. This is the best nothing for you. And I am right with you right here, because you are good enough right now with this nothing. This, you doing nothing, is enough for me. And then watch the magic unfold, because if they're loved there, then they can go anywhere. Then that you have just given them all of the compassion and understanding that they're longing for, and all the freedom and autonomy to make any choice that they need. And I truly believe that relationship of connection and trust that's formed in that nothing, in that bottom, is what we are still seeing the fruit of that today in our relationship. Just before this call, I was pulling my son down the street in a wagon. He loves all things kind of fast and wheeled and loves being pulled in things. And then it was my turn. I got in the wagon and he left me in the middle of the street without like pulling me to safety. And I was kind of stuck. I was like, get me out of here. And of course that my demand to be supported getting out of the wagon triggered his nervous system, and he ran inside and left me out there. And I just thought, man, this is okay. Like, you can abandon me in the middle of the street in a wagon rolling towards a neighbor's car, and we're okay. And there's no blow up. I know he's not going to run inside and hurt somebody or hurt himself, that we can make these like big mistakes together, and it's okay. And that directly takes me back to that burnout phase and that doing nothing phase, that like that radical acceptance. It just changes everything.
Absolutely. And to go back to, research and screens, there is research. I mean, it's emerging. I haven't so much seen research with YouTube, but I haven't really looked, because usually the questions we get from parents is from gaming. And there's definitely gaming and the neurodivergent brain coming out, and it's fascinating. And it flies in the face of every, all the traditional, screens are going to, just ruin your child's brain. It's, all of this. There is actually research coming out.
Oh, thank you, Heather, for saying that. I'm so glad.
Yeah.
We deserve that kind of research.
We do.
And our kids do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's being led by neurodivergent brains. It's kind of like, oh, well, maybe we should hand this over to the people who are experts in their own physiology, in their own brain. What an amazing concept.
I love that you said YouTube is what healed your child, because we were in that crisis, and my daughter was in that burnout, and we were just like, that same, like, we have no idea what to do, and it was sort of like, let's just love her where she's at. And what that looked like was, she was laying in her bed and she watched YouTube all day long. And I can remember that there was a part of me that was like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible mother. Because we're so trained that that's not the way. But then there was such this conflict in, like, society was kind of saying, I'm a bad mom because I'm allowing this to happen. Like, you can't let your kid lay in bed and watch YouTube all day. But then at the same time, we started to see a peacefulness in her. And so then it was like, like, there's something to this. There's something here. And I think that sometimes we get so wrapped up in, like, trying to be the parent we're supposed to be, that we kind of forget that this is a little person. This is a little human being with a heart and a soul and a mind. And they hurt, and they're sad. And so we would look at my daughter, and we would see the pain and the hurt in her face and her eyes. And that is what kind of inspired us to just, like, all right, like, throw it all out, scrap everything, complete shift in our life, because I'm going to do anything I possibly can to take that hurt out of her. And even if I'm going against all the rules, I was like, that's okay. And so for us, my daughter watched YouTube and laid in her bed for almost an entire year. And that's the thing that's really challenging too, is I think that people go, well, I have been doing low demand for 2 weeks, and they are still like they still don't want to do anything. They're still having the meltdowns. They're still really angry. And sometimes it's hard for parents to hear when I go, well, it took a full year for her to heal, and that's hard to see when they're not showering, they're not brushing teeth, they don't want to eat, and so I think that timeline is really important. And then after a year, my daughter just like she emerged and was like, I got some stuff I need to do. And we were like, but okay, let's go. Like, mama's ready. So I would love to hear a little bit about that timeline from when you're in burnout. It's hard, scary, and dark. You sort of choose to shift, but there's a time before things start to kind of emerge back out. What did that timeline look like for you guys?
Very similar to what you just described. I remember the day that burnout started for us. My child was a pandemic kindergartner, and they'd been really excited about going to school with their older brother. And then obviously that didn't happen, and online kindergarten was a big fat fail. And we eventually found this cute little backyard kindergarten with a bunch of neurodivergent 6-year-olds like digging in the mud. And I was like, hallelujah, we found our answer. And we did that for a month. And then I think the cumulative stress of the year that we had been through, and just frankly that structured settings, no matter how friendly they are very threatening. And there came a day where they didn't want to get out of the car. And I physically wrapped my arms around them. I did all the things that I had been trained to do. Like I was doing stellar parenting from a certain mindset. I was like, I'm not going to let anxiety win. I'm going to prove to them that they can handle this. I'm going to show them they can trust this teacher. And I dragged them to the teacher. Teacher bear hugged them, and I left and I went home, and it was 2.5 hours. And looking back, something broke in me in that 2.5 hours, because I said, no matter how good that is, I don't feel right about that. Something is wrong. I never want to do that again to my child. And I just had a really dramatic response to that experience, which is one of the things, as I'm like discerning and sitting with my own PDA identity, I think that there are these moments where in choosing low demand practice for those adults who are PDA or discovering their own PDA, that low demand fits me like a glove. And part of what I'm healing is a lifetime of all of the ways my nervous system and my brain got warped by a demand laden world. And that moment where I used my power over them and dragged them to their teacher, that felt so wrong to me and my inner child. That anyway, that's just a piece of the puzzle. And then when I picked them up from school, teacher was like, oh, they had a great morning. It was no problem. They got over it fine. We got in the van and they started screaming at me, and we never came back. They went up to their room and didn't leave. They didn't speak to me. They wouldn't eat anything. So just a clear issue of masking. They masked all day until I picked them up, and then the whole thing fell apart. That was day one. And I'm always hesitant for people who are living through burnout. I'm really hesitant to talk about when things went back to normal, or because I do believe in our case that my child has never been the same again.
Yes.
That there was no point where they returned to the before.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that can be hard to say, hard to hear, but it's true. But in many ways, it's more like a cocoon and a butterfly type experience than like a hole that you then climb out of. It's like they were becoming something new in that time. And so the emergence was like, whoa, who is this kid? It was about a year before, and I remember the day because I would bring them pretzels with Nutella. That was all they could eat. And there would be no exchange. I'd have to like slide it in and then sneak out so that I didn't threaten anybody. And then one day they looked up at me and said, "Thanks, Mom." And I was like, okay. And then they started eating, and then they said, "Do you want to go outside?" I was like, okay. And we were like buddies again. My child makes like big decisions and then moves forward with gusto. There's no gap between decision and action. So it just kind of makes sense for them. But I think what's interesting about the timeline is that it was about a year for my child. But when they started doing better is actually when my PTSD symptoms really intensified. It was like I was holding it together for that whole year, just like desperate to see something change. And then as life came back into them, I began to shake. I couldn't sleep through the night. I was sweating through my clothes. I was having flashbacks. Like I was having this rush of intense symptoms. And so then it was like 3 to 6 more months after that until I felt well inside of me. So I just think that's important to name, that sometimes their trauma or their burnout doesn't line up with ours. And sometimes when things get better is when the adult gets worse. So just kind of knowing that may be coming and to have more support as you see signs of burnout lessening for your child, be ready with a support team to step in for you.
That makes so much sense. That makes so much sense because you're so hyped up on cortisol and adrenaline, and you're so focused on your child that, when it's just like a traumatic event for parents. And we do have parents that we work with that, come to that realization after their child, after they've implemented the low demands, and, they come to us and they're like, it's almost like PTSD. And we're like, it is PTSD. And we're in a really, really good place now. Far better place than we were 3 years ago, as far as, supporting my son's PDA. And I still have, if he comes at me too fast, or, if he's coming to hug me, but it's in a very fast way or something. And it's like, you could immediately get your guard up, and it's like, it's real. It is a very real thing.
Yeah, it is. Yes. And so many parents ask me, they'll say, if this was my partner, I would never stay.
Yeah.
But I don't get to opt out with my child. And I think something that's important to be named is that your body doesn't know how much you love them. Your body is registering the threat. And that's creating this internal sense like, you are a threat to me and I love you more than my own life. Like, how do these two things live together in my one flesh? I think that's a big part of the reason that therapies that are more somatic are really important for us, in particular in healing from the trauma in parenting, is that part of what we need to do is to bring together that emotional experience of loving connection with an embodied experience of safety in your own home, and to feel both love and safety at the same time around your child. It's really, really important. So if you're just pursuing like a talk therapy where you're processing, for one thing, that's not the best trauma recovery modality anyway, that you really don't want to rehash your trauma just verbally, that it needs to involve body work. But that even more than in a situation where you have some agency to be able to leave, that I think within parenting, it's so important to reconnect to our bodies. That a lot of parents cope with that disconnect between I love you more than life itself and I don't feel safe around you by dissociating from their bodies. And so there can often be also kind of lasting difficulties with tuning in. So like a lot of the low demand process that I do has to do with reattuning to your body, learning what your needs are. What do you feel in this moment? What do you need in this moment? Because dissociative parenting, where we're kind of checked out, can look like low demand because you're like, sure, whatever. But that's definitely not the same as
Right.
like, yes,
Right.
I am with you and I choose this.
Absolutely. And, the majority of our kiddos have at least one parent who's neurodivergent themselves, and they may not know it. And they may have spent their entire life, disassociating, having to mask to get through, the neurotypical world. So I like that you put that it's not just about, okay, we're going to implement low demand for our children, but it's encompassing it, for the parent as well. Yes, we are taking care of our children, but we need to take care of ourselves as well. And that's an integral part of it. We say things like, oh, just remember, you got to take care of yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup, and then especially if you are, I'm diagnosed ADHD, late diagnosed ADHD, and I highly suspect I'm autistic as well. And the more I start learning about the internal presentation of PDA, I'm kind of like, that sounds really familiar too. But I'm still, trying to with that. And I completely forgot where I was going with this, but I just know I was talking about encompassing and making sure that we're taken care of as well, I think is where I was going with that. So thank you for, making that an element as well, because it's just as important. Oh, I know where I was going with that. You can't pour from an empty cup, but when you have a neurodivergent brain, you don't know what that means. It's like,
Yes.
so I'm supposed to light a candle and take a bubble bath and maybe go get a pedicure or something? Like, what does that mean? I don't understand. I don't, because to maybe someone who is neurotypical, that's their taking care of themselves, and it's like, what? I don't get that. So thank you. I thank you for bringing that to the forefront as well, Amanda.
There is a lot of emotional needs of the parents, and if you can't kind of take that time and intention to kind of deal with your own emotional needs, how then can you model that? How can you walk with a child? And I think part of, what Heather was talking about is, so I'm late diagnosed autistic. I did not know I was autistic until after my kids. And so then I realized, in order to support my kids, I was going to have to do some pretty serious work on myself. And I was going to have to learn how to, listen to my own feelings and dig into, like, what is it that I am feeling? How do I regulate myself? I don't know that there's anyone who is like, I love conflict, and I'm prepared, to like be calm, cool, and collected in the midst of, a fight. But that, I think, being an adult who doesn't understand maybe how their own brain and body work as far as being neurodivergent, and how do I process emotions? Because I never learned that as a child. And so now how do I teach it to my kid? And I think that sometimes can come up as a roadblock for that healing of the kid and this low demand, because we don't even know how to do it ourselves. And so I know for me, one of the biggest pieces in bringing, that healing and bringing that peacefulness to our family was the work that I had to put in to myself. And I still have to work on that. And that's something that I have to go back to, like, every day. And how can I keep myself regulated? How can I be calm? How can I process this situation so that I can walk through my child who have these big emotions? And my daughter is 13, and man, that's just a tough time in life, in like the absolute best situations. And so how can I walk her through this when I'm like I got to figure out how to be me right now, and finding my own neurodivergence and being able to share that with her, and being able to say, I kind of don't know what I'm doing either, and and I think also just admitting that removed a demand from me. And then I was able to be like, I don't know, we kind of messed some stuff up. Let's try it different. And, but I had to address myself, and I had to work on me, and I still do, if I'm going to support my family. And I think that sometimes as a parent, that's really scary to have to look at yourself and go, okay, there's some issues.
Yeah. Yeah, I talked about the 6 steps that I identified. The first step always is having what I call the demand lens. But what I think is important about every demand, and this is the framework that I use for self-reflection, is that every demand, so it might be something like come to the dinner table to eat. That's the demand. Then underneath it, a layer beneath it, is an expectation. So some kind of positive vision that I have of my child or of this scenario. So like the dinner table is the place where we connect each day, or it's important for us to sit down and have a healthy meal. And then so there's the demand, like in the moment, concrete. There's the expectation, the reason that I'm issuing this demand. But then beneath that is my adult need. And that is where it gets raw. That's like, and if you're not sitting at the table, my husband is going to get mad at you, and he's going to yell. And then I'm going to have to intervene, which reminds me of my childhood when I was always having to separate my mom and my dad when they fought. And that makes me feel like, my brain's going to explode. So I need you to sit at this table right now before he walks in the door so that doesn't happen to me. Right. Like that's, and oftentimes we get sort of stuck in the first two. Like it's good to sit at the table. Good food happens at the table. And we ignore that the real reason is so that my inner child doesn't get triggered by the yelling at the table, which reminds me of all the yelling at the table that happened when I was a little kid. And we can actually hold those expectations and those demands a lot more loosely and lightly when we've done the work to know our needs. And because that's really a conversation to have with your partner that has nothing to do with your child and everything to do with your marriage. And that we can say, eat in your room. You're totally fine. I don't need you to come to the table. Healthy food happens in your room. Family connection happens on a walk. Like there are all these ways that we can get our needs met and meet our positive expectations. Although some of them we need to interrogate and say, is that really necessary? But many times we can find ways to meet those things if we're really honest about what's driving us and on that deeper level.
I'm having flashbacks from my childhood.
Sorry, I should have put a trigger warning on that.
No. It's just things that it just didn't occur to me that, that's just yes. I mean, yes, absolutely. Wow, I'm going to have to take a day off. I'm going to have to do some self-reflection here after our conversation here, Amanda. And it's good. It's good work. It's because it's work that has to be done. So you can merge it and be okay with it and let it go. Right.
Mm. Yeah. I always say my core commitment as a parent is to meet my own needs, to be okay without asking something that's too hard of you.
Yes.
Those are my categories, is hard and too hard. And that what's essential is learning the difference. And that no one can determine that from the outside. I can't say, hey, that shouldn't be too hard for you. No, it doesn't matter what I think. It's about what your internal experience is. And when things are hard, we are brave, we ask for help, we show up, we do our best. And when things are too hard, we drop it. We let it go wholeheartedly, proactively, durably. And that's true for everyone in the family. So my too hard line might shift too. Something that's doable today might be too hard tomorrow, depending on what else I've handled. So it could be that I can handle a little bit of fighting at the table when I'm like really settled. I'm not going to get pulled into my old childhood stuff. But if I've been through it, I didn't sleep well, I didn't eat well, I'm not feeling well, I've had a hard day, I'm going to get triggered like that. So it's not a day for us to sit around the table together because I can't be okay at the same time as I'm letting this other stuff play out. So it's really that commitment that I make to the people I love of saying, I need to be okay while not asking something that's too hard of you. And I have to show up to myself to do all of that work to actually be okay and respect and honor what's too hard for you today. And that's not about what I think should be too hard. It's about what's actually too hard. What you're telling me is too hard. And I trust you that you'll tell me the truth about what's too hard.
I just love that. I love your whole approach, and it just speaks to my heart, and I'm really excited for your book. So tell us again the name of your book and when it's going to be released.
Yeah, it's called Low Demand Parenting, and it comes out July 21st, 2023. It will be available all the places books are sold. I would love it if you bought it from a local bookstore, but buy it from the place that you can do. Zero judgment there. And if you're a listener type, it will also be on audiobook.
Okay.
I'm particularly excited. I'm going to share as a pre-order bonus because it's on pre-order right now. So if you head to my website, amandadiekman.com, I have a low demand screens course because screens is such a common place where people get really hung up with all this stuff we're talking about, like their deep fears and needs all come raging out around screens. So I have put together a low demand screens course as a free gift to anyone who pre-orders the book. So
that's amazing.
Love to offer that to your community.
Yeah, awesome. And you said it's going to be available on audiobook as well?
Yes.
I live for audiobooks.
Yes.
Because so I can multitask. Are you narrating it?
So sadly, I am not. I tried to negotiate that into my contract to be like, I really, really want to narrate my own book. But as it turned out, it's a big British publisher, and I'm kind of a small fish in a big pool. So they were like, nah, friend, you don't get to read your own book. Book 2.
Once I was going to say book 2, when you talk about school, the part 2, low demand. Yeah. when because I'm pretty sure school will be in. That's another huge. We could go on and on about school, but that's fantastic. Thank you so much for um, joining us. Thank you so much for your contribution to this very misunderstood life that many of us live. Um, and can you let us know, like, how can people learn more about you? How can, what is your contact information? Are you, I know you're on Insta because everybody's on Insta. So how can people reach you?
My favorite place to hang out is on Instagram, and I'm at Low Demand Amanda. And I would truly love it if somebody listened to this coffee podcast and reached out to me on Instagram and just said, like, hi, I heard you. It was cool. That would be so wonderful. I always write back. So that would be awesome. I love to engage in DMs. And another thing that listeners might tune in for, every Friday, I do a low demand day in the life where in my stories, I kind of go into the behind the scenes of what it actually looks like for autistic me and neurodivergent 3 to gallivant through the world. And it's always real and it's every Friday. So you can kind of tune in for a little Friday entertainment or inspiration for there.
I follow you on Instagram, and I like the stories because it feels like you're talking to me. And like we're friends and we're buddies and we're hanging out together. So thank you for opening up and for sharing your life and letting other parents have a glimpse into that, and inspiring. Thank you so much for taking time today to chat with us, and we'll be sharing links to your webpage and Instagram. We actually love Journeys with PDA, loves your content, and so we try to share a lot of your stuff to our stories. So if you follow our page, it's easy to find Amanda because we're good buddies now. So
Thank you. And it's genuine. I feel like friends with everybody that follows along too. It gets a big way that I've found community and connection. And
Absolutely.
I used to feel so lonely, and I don't
Yes.
anymore. I have found hundreds of great friends who are just with me on the journey.
Yep.
So, come along, please be my buddy.